Okay, so usually when we start these deep dives into the primate world, we're setting the stage with something pretty substantial.
Right.
You know, we're picturing chimps, gorillas, even lemurs, animals that physically, claim some space.
They make noise, they break branches, you can see them.
Exactly. But today, I want to start by asking you to just look at your hand, specifically your index finger.
Because the subject of today's deep dive could literally hang off that finger, like a tiny koala bear.
Which is an image I have not been able to get out of my head. We are talking about the Pygmy marmoset.
World's smallest monkey.
And small doesn't even begin to cover it, does it?
No, it's really hard to convey just how small without a reference point. We're talking about a primate where the head is less than 1.5 inches wide.
The text calls it a literal scoop of fur, an animal the size of an apple. And I think the temptation when you see something that tiny, and let's be honest, that cute, is to just write it off.
To just see it as a novelty.
Yeah, look at the tiny monkey. Isn't nature whimsical?
Right. It's so easy to infantilize them, but that would be a huge mistake because when you really dig into the research, especially the work of ecologist Stella De La Torre, which is most of our source material today, you realize this isn't just a cute animal.
Oh, no.
It's a highly specialized, evolutionarily distinct species that has carved out a really difficult, kind of a brutal niche in the Amazon rainforest.
That was my biggest takeaway. I went in expecting, fluffy facts, and I came out realizing that being the size of an apple in the Amazon is, well, it's a logistical nightmare.
It is.
And unfortunately, it's a species that is vanishing.
Yeah.
And because they're so small and so good at hiding, the really terrifying part is that almost nobody is noticing they're gone.
That is the silent crisis we absolutely have to get to. But to understand the gravity of what we're losing, I think we first have to understand the biological machine that is the Pygmy marmoset.
So let's look at the Lilliputian lion, as they're sometimes called. I'm looking at the photos from the field notes right now. Miniature porcelain is the description they use for the face.
It's a striking look. They have these white mustaches, vertical stripes running down the body to help them blend into bark, and this fuzzy tail that curls up into a hook.
But that name, Leoncillo Little Lion, that implies a certain attitude, or at least a level of dominance.
It does. And they need that attitude.
Yeah.
Because physically they are at the absolute bottom of the food chain. To survive the Amazon at the size of a thumbprint, you need a very, very specific survival strategy.
And that strategy revolves around a diet that, I have to admit, it baffled me at first. I read the term gummivore.
Right.
And I had to double check I wasn't reading a fantasy novel.
It sounds completely made up, doesn't it?
It sounds like they live on candy. But the reality described in the research is much more labor-intensive.
It is. Being a gummivore means they specialize in eating the sticky resin, or gum, that comes from tree bark. And it's really important to distinguish this from sap. I think a lot of people use those terms interchangeably.
Oh, he definitely did. I just assumed it was like tapping a maple tree for syrup.
It's a bit different. So sap flows through the vascular system of the tree, deep inside, moving water and nutrients. Resin is different. It's often a defense mechanism, produced by the outer layers of bark to seal up a wound or trap insects.
So when the marmoset goes for the resin,
right,
they aren't just passively drinking, they're actually provoking the tree.
Exactly. They are wounding it. They have these specialized lower incisors. They're incredibly sharp, almost like tiny chisels, and they use them to gouge holes into the bark.
The numbers here are just staggering. The text mentions a single tree can have up to 1,300 of these holes.
That's right. So they gouge the hole. The tree secretes this carbohydrate-rich jelly to try and seal the wound. It's basically a scab made of sugar. And then the marmoset comes back later to lick it up.
It's basically farming, but it seems so inefficient. I mean, I was trying to do the math on the energy cost. You're the size of an apple. You have to gnaw through Amazonian hardwood bark 1,300 times just to get dinner.
It's an immense energy cost. And you have to remember, gum is high in carbs, but it's really low in protein. So they're kind of running on a sugar high, but they're constantly on the verge of a nutritional deficit.
Which would explain why they are so territorial about these trees. If you put that much work in, you're not going to let anyone else get near it.
Of course not.
But here's the weird part that I found in the research. They're food snobs.
They are. You'd think, given how much energy it takes, they would just find the tree with the most gum and set up shop. Logic says go for volume.
But de la Torre's research shows there's basically no correlation. They ignore these high-yield trees to work on specific, seemingly random ones.
It's one of the big lingering mysteries. Each family group has specific favorite trees they return to, and those favorites differ from group to group.
So it's not just eat what's available.
No. It seems to be a matter of acquired taste, or maybe there's a specific mineral content in certain trees we haven't identified yet. It's almost like a family passing down a preference for a specific vintage of wine.
I love that. But because that gum is just sugar, they have to supplement. The text says they hunt insects, but not like other monkeys, snatching a bug out of the air.
No, they just don't have the mass for that. They hunt with this slow, stalking crouch. The source compares it to a cat stalking a mouse. It has to be incredibly deliberate.
So we have a tiny, farming, insect-stalking lion. But the thing that really elevates the pygmy marmoset from just an interesting animal to, I think, an anthropological marvel is the social structure.
Yes.
Because usually with animals this small, we assume it's every creature for itself.
And here, it's the exact opposite. Their survival depends entirely on cooperation. They live in these small family groups of about 6, usually parents and their offspring. And biologically, they are just up against a wall.
This goes back to the size issue, right? The females often give birth to twins.
Which is common in this family of monkeys, but think about the physics of that. For a mother, the size of an apple carrying and nursing 2 infants is. It's a metabolic impossibility if she has to do it by herself.
She physically couldn't get enough calories from the gum to support herself and make the milk.
She would starve to death. So the system forces cooperation. The father carries the babies on his back. The older siblings stand guard. It is a mandatory, it takes a village system. If they don't cooperate, the lineage dies out. Simple as that.
And that cooperation seems to have driven the evolution of their communication.
Right.
This was the part of the deep dive where I really had to just pause and reread the section, the babbling.
This is Stella de la Torre's specialty. She has these exquisitely sensitive ears, which she needs because the frequency these monkeys operate on is incredibly high.
Right.
They have alarm whistles that are shriller than crickets to avoid attracting predators. But the infants, that's where the real breakthrough is.
The text says they babble like human babies. Now, as a layman, I have to ask, are we just projecting that? Are we just hearing noise and calling it babbling because they're cute?
And that's a fair skepticism. You should be asking that. But the acoustic analysis actually backs it up. It appears to be functionally the same process as human infants.
Wow.
Human babies babble to experiment with sound, to map their vocal tract, and to get a response from caregivers. Pygmy marmoset infants seem to be doing the exact same thing. They aren't just making noise, they are practicing.
Practicing what, exactly? Because usually animals just make the sounds their species makes. A dog barks, it doesn't have to learn how to bark.
They are practicing their dialect.
See, that's the word that stopped me cold. Dialect. That implies culture.
And the evidence really does support that. De la Torre found that different family groups have distinct vocal signatures. Their trills vary in length and frequency. And crucially, we know this isn't just genetic.
How do we know that?
Because of the ambient noise. The research highlighted that the dialects shift based on the acoustic environment. So if a group lives in a noisy part of the jungle, maybe near a rushing river or a colony of loud cicadas, they develop a different accent to cut through that specific noise floor compared to a group living in a quieter area.
So they are actively modulating their language based on their environment.
Exactly. And the infants have to learn that specific modulation by babbling. That is 100% learned behavior.
It blows the dumb animal theory right out of the water. You have linguistic culture in a creature that fits in a teacup.
It really challenges the assumption that complex vocal learning is unique to humans or, maybe great apes. We're seeing a parallel evolution of language here, driven by the need to stay connected in a very dense, very dangerous forest.
Okay, so we have this vivid picture of them now, these complex, chatty farming families. But I want to take the listener into the actual environment for a minute, because the descriptions of the fieldwork in Yasuni National Park, it's not a walk in the park.
No, not at all. The text describes it as a place of Sushin angles. Trees just jutting out wildly, butterflies twirling like whirlwinds. It is chaotic and it is dense.
And somewhere in all that chaos is the Parkia balslidi, the amber-colored tree they love. But finding the tree is only step 1.
Step 2 is waiting and waiting. Because, as the experts note, pygmy marmosets are, they're famously lazy.
I related to this so hard. They don't like mornings, and they hate the rain.
They really do. They have a sleeping tree and a feeding tree. If it's raining, they just hit the snooze button. The researchers literally have to wait for the weather to clear before the monkeys will even consider starting their day.
But once they do come out, good luck actually seeing them.
They are the ultimate masters of camouflage. Their fur mimics the texture and color of the bark perfectly, and they move in these quick, jerky spurts. The text says they're skimming the surface of the tree.
So you could be standing 3 feet away from a family of 6 and have no idea they were there.
Absolutely none. Hidden in plain sight.
But there was one specific encounter in the source material that I think really shifted the tone of this entire deep dive for me. It went from, oh, look at the cool monkeys, to realizing how precarious their lives are. It's the scene with the tamarin.
This is a crucial moment for understanding their vulnerability. So the pygmies are at their feeding tree, they're working the holes, licking the gum, and suddenly a golden-mantled tamarin shows up.
Now, for context, a tamarin is still a small monkey. I mean, smaller than a house cat.
Sure.
But compared to a pygmy marmoset.
It's a giant. It's a monster. And the tamarin decides it wants the gum. It's essentially a robbery in progress.
And the reaction of the pygmy marmosets is just, it's visceral.
Yeah.
They don't fight. They don't scream. They don't try to defend their farm that they've worked so hard on.
They freeze. Complete and total stillness. The text describes one juvenile pygmy just staring at this intruder, and in a moment of pure, abject terror, it just urinates a few drops into the undergrowth.
It's heartbreaking. But it tells you everything you need to know about their place in the world.
Exactly. They're prey, snakes, raptors, larger monkeys, everything wants to eat them. Their only defense is invisibility, silence, staying totally still.
But that strategy hiding, being small, staying quiet, that works against natural predators. It turns out it doesn't work so well against the threat they're facing now.
No. Invisibility doesn't help you when your entire home is just erased.
This brings us to the Great Disappearance. And the numbers that Stella de la Torre is finding they're terrifying.
They are collapse-level numbers. In 2012, she surveyed a specific area, and she was tracking 7 healthy family groups. 10 years later, only 1 group remained.
And it's not just a slow, gradual decline. There was that specific case in 2017.
3 groups vanished, just overnight. One day they were there, babbling and farming their trees. The next day, total silence.
So what is killing them? Is it as simple as the trees just being cut down?
That's the root cause, but the mechanism is more complex. So they live in what are called gallery forests, these narrow strips of forest right along riverbanks.
Right.
Unfortunately, rivers are the highways of the Amazon. Humans like to build there, farmers like to plant there.
So we are slicing up their entire world for palm oil and housing?
Which forces them into smaller and smaller fragmented pockets. And this brings us to the second killer, disease.
This surprised me. I didn't realize they were so susceptible to our bugs. I just assumed there was more of a species barrier.
There usually is, but when you fragment the forest, you increase what we call edge effects. The monkeys are forced closer to human settlements, to livestock, and they are incredibly fragile. Yellow fever, herpes. De la Torre even speculates that COVID-19 could be a major threat to them.
So that sudden disappearance in 2017.
It was likely a disease outbreak. Probably yellow fever. It sweeps through a group, and because they're so social, so cooperative, grooming each other, carrying each other's babies, it just takes them all.
So the very thing that makes them successful, their closeness, is what dooms them in an epidemic.
Precisely.
And then on top of all that, you have the pet trade, which I have to say really angers me.
It is tragic. People see a finger monkey on social media and they want one. They want a cute little pet.
Yeah.
But as we've discussed, they need a complex diet of specific gums and insects. They need high humidity. They need to hear their family's dialect. You put them in a cage in a living room and they wither.
We are loving them to death.
We are.
There's a perspective in the source material that I think grounds this tragedy in a really profound way. It comes from Cesar Piaguache.
Yes. Cesar is a member of the Sequoia indigenous community. He's been working with De la Torre for years. I mean, he knows this forest better than any academic ever could.
And even he is finding empty trees.
That's when you know it's truly bad. When the people who have coexisted with these animals for centuries, who use machetes to track them through the densest brush, when they can no longer find them, the system is broken.
Cesar shared a creation myth from his people about the marmosets. And honestly, it feels less like a myth and more like a prophecy now.
It's the story of their origin. The legend says the creator made a pair of beings who were intensely private. They didn't want to associate with others. They just wanted to be left alone. So the creator turned them into pygmy marmosets.
Small, quick, hard to see, literally designed for privacy.
Exactly. They were biologically engineered to live a private life.
And the irony is just, it's painful.
It is. The one thing they were designed for, privacy, is the one thing we are taking from them. We are breaching that solitude. And because they rely on hiding to survive, once there's nowhere left to hide, they don't have a plan B.
Right.
They can't fight back like a chimp. They can't run like a jaguar. They just freeze.
It makes you wonder, why does it matter? I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate for the listener who's stuck in traffic right now, worried about their mortgage or their job. It's a tiny monkey. The Amazon is huge. If they go, does it really change anything for us?
It changes everything. The pygmy marmoset is what we call an indicator species. Because they are so specialized, needing those specific gallery forests, that specific gum, that specific water source, they are the first to fall when the ecosystem gets sick.
They are the warning light on the dashboard.
That's a perfect way to put it. Their disappearance tells us that the gallery forests are failing. And if those forests fail, the water quality degrades, the soil erodes, and the thousands of other species, including the humans who live along those rivers, they're next in line.
So when the little lion goes silent, the roar of the whole jungle is about to change.
That's the reality. It's the start of the unraveling.
You know, we always try to lead these deep dives with a thought that lingers. And for me, it goes back to that social structure. We talked about how kind they are to each other, how they don't fight.
Aggression within the group is basically non-existent. They are, by their very nature, cooperative. It's how they survived for millions of years.
And Stella de la Torre posed a question in her research that I found really unsettling. She asked if that kindness is actually a liability now.
It's a chilling thought. Evolution favored cooperation for them because it helped them raise twins and farm gum in their world. But we have completely changed the rules of the game.
Right.
The modern world is defined by aggressive encroachment, by competition, by destruction.
So in a world that rewards aggression, or at least resilience against aggression,
Does the cooperative species even stand a chance? Or is kindness an evolutionary dead end in the Anthropocene?
that is a heavy question to sit with. But I think it's the right one. Because it's not just about the monkeys, is it? It's about what kind of world we are building and what traits we are selecting for. Are we building a world where only the aggressive survive?
And if we are, what does that say about us?
On that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. A huge thank you to the work of Stella de la Torre for documenting these lives before they vanish, and to all the photographers who bring them to us.
And thank you for listening.
Keep your eyes open. You never know what you might miss if you aren't looking closely. We'll catch you in the next deep dive.